Sometimes a story comes along that just grips the entire nation. A shocking quadruple murder in a quiet college town, a frantic nationwide manhunt, and a suspect who, it turns out, was studying the very crimes he was accused of. This is the tragic story of the Idaho College Murders, and in this explainer, we're going to break it all down, from the horrific crime itself to the complex investigation and the one question that still lingers over everything: why? But before we get into any of the details of the case, it is so important to remember the human cost here. At a vigil for the victims, Ethan Chapin's mother, Stacy, shared these incredibly powerful words. She said, "Time is precious and it's something you can't get back." Because above all else, this story is about a devastating loss for 4 families. All right, so our story begins in Moscow, Idaho. And if you don't know it, it's a small, tight-knit college town, the kind of place where a seemingly normal weekend in November of 2022 was about to be completely and horribly shattered. Let's talk about who we lost. These are the 4 bright, young University of Idaho students whose lives were cut short. You had Kaylee Gunn-Calvis and Madison Mogan, both 21, and they were best friends. Then there was 20-year-old Xana Kernodle and her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, also 20. They were roommates, they were friends, and by all accounts, just absolutely full of life. 4 lives. Just think about that number for a second. It's staggering. On the morning of November 13th, 2022, all 4 of them were discovered stabbed to death inside their off-campus rental home. And right from the very beginning, the scene was just baffling. Police show up, and they've got nothing. No murder weapon, no signs that anyone broke in, and absolutely no suspects. For a town that hadn't seen a murder in years, this complete lack of answers plunged the whole community into this state of just profound fear. And that fear, that confusion, well, it lit a fire under law enforcement. It kicked off this massive nationwide hunt for a killer, putting an immense amount of pressure on everyone involved. And you can just feel the tension building over these weeks. The murders happened on November 13th, but it wasn't until December 7th, that's nearly a whole month later, that police finally released their first major lead. They're on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra. For weeks, as the community was grieving, the killer was still out there, somewhere. As you can imagine, this case just exploded nationally. Thousands of tips were pouring into the FBI. But with no actual suspect, this information vacuum formed, and it got filled really fast by online sleuths, speculation, and just wild rumors that honestly made the official investigation even harder. But then, after weeks of what felt like dead ends, investigators got the break they so desperately needed. A few crucial clues would finally point them toward a single person. Ultimately, the case broke wide open because of this combination of modern digital forensics and just good old-fashioned detective work. And it really all boiled down to 3 key pieces of evidence. Okay, so first, remember that white Hyundai Elantra? Investigators tracked it to a location right near the crime scene. Second, they dug into cell phone data, which was huge. It placed a suspect near the victim's home at least 12 times before the attack, and then showed his phone went completely dark during the murders themselves. And the final critical piece? A knife sheath left behind at the scene containing a single source of male DNA on its button snap. You put all of that evidence together and it all pointed to one person. On December 30th, 2022, police arrested Bryan Kohberger. He was a 28-year-old Ph.D. student, and in this unbelievably chilling twist, he was studying criminology at Washington State University, which is just a few miles away from the crime scene. So Kohberger's arrested, and it seems like the stage is set for a long, very high-profile trial. But then the case took another absolutely shocking turn. So everyone was expecting a lengthy, very public death penalty trial. But then on June 30th, 2025, Kohberger suddenly reverses course. He agrees to plead guilty. Now, the deal spared him the death penalty, sure, but it also came at a huge cost. The public would never get to see the full case against him laid out in a courtroom. The sentencing hearing, though, that was the family's one chance to confront him directly. And Kaylee Gunn-Calvis' sister, Olivia, delivered this incredibly powerful statement right to Kohberger. She said the victims were everything you can never be: loved, accepted, vibrant, accomplished, brave, and powerful. Just wow. And so, on July 23, 2025, the legal chapter of this case finally slammed shut. Bryan Kohberger was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. He will never be a free man again. But here's the thing. Even with a conviction, one enormous piece of the puzzle was just missing. Justice was technically served, but the families, the public, everyone was left with this huge, lingering question. Right? The plea deal brought a conviction, but it left the single biggest question totally unanswered. What was the motive? Kohberger himself has never offered any kind of explanation, leaving this massive empty void right at the heart of this tragedy. And in that void, without an official motive, one prominent theory really began to take hold. It centers on the incel subculture, which is short for involuntary celibate. Now, this theory comes from Kohberger's reported academic fascination with a guy named Elliot Rodger, a mass murderer who said he did it because of romantic rejection. And what really poured gasoline on this theory was a truly chilling discovery. After the murders, a user online named Papa Roger, which seems like a pretty clear reference to Elliot Rodger, posted some very knowledgeable comments in a forum asking, did the killers stop at 4 victims out of exhaustion? That profile was deleted right after Kohberger was arrested. So, in the end, where does that leave us? The killer is behind bars. A legal version of justice has been served. But without a trial, without a confession, the families were denied the one thing the justice system could never, ever guarantee: an answer. And that haunting question of why may forever be a part of this small town's tragedy.